Welcome back to Utah Cop Watch. Thank you to the Norman Nick Show and Red Bull Coffee and Crimes. Big shout out to the Mendoza family and to baby Alex. Stay strong. Soon the truth will come out. You'll be back home with your family. Thank you everyone for supporting the Mendoza family and standing together against corruption. There's a lot of innocent people in prison right now because of the corruption. Check out the links down below for part 1 and part 2 and for the GoFundMe account for baby Alex and the petition. Please share to expose these tyrants we have in our courts. It is your right to let the government know how you feel about this case. Stay tuned for part 4. There's a lot more to expose.
Welcome to the Norman Nick Show. I am Norman. Now, I am very excited today to be podcasting this late in the afternoon for the third time today. We do have a special guest on. We have attorney Brad Anderson in regards to the case dealing with baby Alex and what's going on as far as Nick and the murder of Mr. Gonzalez and everything that happened back in 2022. Brad, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I can't complain. I'm glad you were able to make it. As far as the questioning for the audience and the case, I know there might be some stuff that you can't talk about because I'm understanding there is an appeal going on currently.
Yeah, well, so I guess to get the language technically correct, we're not quite at the appellate stage yet. So still in the trial court, we filed a motion for a new trial, and it's been argued, and now we're just waiting for a ruling on that, which I'm expecting should be any day. Honestly, you should hear if we're going to get that new trial. If we get the new trial, obviously we do a new trial and we don't go to the appellate court. If the judge denies the new trial motion, then we would file an appeal based on stuff that happened kind of pre-trial, at trial, and then arguing the basis for the new trial motion, these juror issues and some new evidence. We can argue those on appeal as well. So we're technically at the appeal stage, although it's post what we would call post-conviction at this point, because the jury came back with the verdict, the judge has sentenced, but we are not quite to the appellate court yet.
Just yet. Are you anticipating it going there within a certain amount of time?
Well, I mean, my hope would be that the judge just does the right thing and grants us a new trial and we don't get to the appellate court. If he doesn't do that, then yes, there are some timelines in the law that we would be kind of bound to as far as time to notify the court we're going to appeal and time to file a brief. But all of that is extendable, and I'm not quite sure exact timeline as far as just the reality of the situation goes. But from when if she were to deny the motion, if we don't get the new trial, we're probably in the 3 to 6 months range to having actually filed our appeal.
Gotcha. So moving forward, as far as questions regarding your competition, I guess, for lack of a better term, as far as Sim Gill, the prosecuting attorney. After the podcast yesterday, there some people were responding back on my DMs, asking questions, as well as in the comments as far as his reputation, your knowledge, if you can speak on it. What are your feelings about Sim and his reputation as far as a prosecuting attorney?
I mean, I don't have much, I guess, to comment about Sim Gill directly. I mean, I think he personally probably doesn't have much to do with this case, honestly. I mean, he wasn't the direct prosecutor. Obviously, he's not the direct prosecutor in any case. He's essentially just the head of the office. So to the extent that he may weigh in on certain questions, he may, but I don't think he directs, in a direct hands-on way, kind of what happens with this case particularly. So I don't have, I guess, much to comment about him. I think people can read online and in the news, stuff that has been said about him. But as far as concerns this case, I don't feel like he played any kind of major role in this case.
As far as optics, do you feel like even though he's kind of, I guess, from behind the scenes, more or less, he's quarterbacking because he is the head honcho in that department. Do you feel his reputation may be on the line, despite him not being, in the game?
Yeah, I mean, I think that probably true with the, I guess we could say, murder or higher profile case, right? Nobody wants to be accused of losing or doing the wrong thing or whatever. So to the extent I think that plays into every case, yeah, I mean, I'm sure it plays into this one as well, especially because there was some media coverage. And when I use the term going forward, the state, I mean, that's kind of all encompassing to, the district attorney's office and the various police departments that were involved in this. And for whatever reason, Alex just has this reputation. The state just believes him to be this kind of Al Capone type figure that if anybody that actually knows how kind of the criminal underworld or the gang type stuff work is just such a ridiculous thing to believe about somebody who is 18 or 19 years old. It's not how it works under any circumstance. That's just not how that works. And so it's ridiculous kind of on a personal level with Alex. But even if you take the personality and him out of the equation and just say, put anybody into that equation, it's not how the world works. I mean, it'd be like believing that an 18 or 19-year-old kid was somehow running the country, right? That's just not how things work.
I would have to agree. Last night when we touched on this, as far as
hold on.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I lost you there for a sec. I'm losing you still. Hang on.
I can hear you perfectly.
Sorry. Can you hear me? Oh, I've got you
I
now.
can hear you. Yeah, you're perfect. Everything's
okay.
clear.
Okay, so somehow you got muted, but anyway, I'm back. So
no, so as far as you're absolutely right as far as like the age difference, because correct me if I'm wrong, but and just put perspective for everybody who's watching. When Nick got busted back in 2013 with his brother for their gang activity, that they did, and the brother took the rap for it. I believe Nick at the time was in his mid 20s or late 20s. So that would have put Alex like 8 or 9 years old.
Right. For sure.
And so the audience knows too, Nick and Alex apparently are related by cousins. Is that correct?
Yeah, and the hard part with that term cousin is it seems like kind of everybody uses it and not necessarily in the correct context, in that literally it's the sibling of one of your parents' siblings, or the child of one of your parents' siblings, right? When we're thinking about cousins. So it could be kind of a looser type relationship. So I believe they are somehow kind of blood related, but I don't think it's like they're actual true cousins, right? But there is some family relation there.
So before we talk about the case itself, I do want to outline a little bit about Nick and his old lady, that have been online. Well, mainly Rondi has been online antagonizing on Facebook. I don't know if you've gotten wind of it. I'm pretty sure you know everything. It seems like a Hatfield McCoy type thing that's going on in Utah and Salt Lake, where we don't know where it started, but we just know it just keeps perpetuating because each side has a nuance to blame the other side for, as far as what they perceive as disrespect or reputation. As far as the age difference and the police coming in, what was the number one reason that you believe they gave immunity to Nick and Ron?
I mean, I think, in my opinion, the answer goes back to this reputation that the state believes that Alex has, that he literally is this kind of Al Capone figure. And this was their way to get him, and they were going to do whatever it took to get him, including, giving immunity to these two people. So I really think it's just their desire to get Alex, and this was the only way they were going to be able to do it.
So basically, in a nutshell, going back to optics, this would be a way for politically whoever had aspirations for the future to make this look good, like they took down a potential kingpin before he became a kingpin.
Right. And I don't know, and we'll probably never know, but I don't know how much of that resided in the district attorney's office and how much of it was pressure from various police departments who had this opinion of Alex, and kind of pushed the district attorney's office in that way. Now, I'm sure the police were very convinced at the district attorney's office, and they believed it as well. But I'm guessing it probably originated more with the police than with the actual attorneys in the district attorney's office. I'm sure they came to believe it, but I do not think it originated there.
Okay. As far as the next questions that were had in pertaining to the immunity that Nick and Rondi were gifted with, and a lot of people perceive it as not necessary given their history and their reputation.
Mm-hmm. Right.
As far as the why, instead of just giving them immunity, why not give them, if you don't know, but why not just give them like witness protection and get them the hell out of Dodge?
Yeah. Well, and so to answer your question on a legal basis, the legal basis is basically that Nick and Rondi, I mean, it's not theoretical. They very much said they intended to invoke the Fifth Amendment, right? They can't be forced to testify. Now, in order to invoke the Fifth, though, you must have some fear of criminal prosecution. Right. You can't invoke the Fifth if there's no possibility you're going to be charged. And to be clear, there's case law that does say an innocent person, you can invoke the Fifth, right? Because just because you're innocent doesn't mean you won't be charged. But there's got to be some connection to it, some way that you could be charged even if you didn't do it. Well, if the state gives you immunity, though, you no longer have the threat of criminal prosecution. So you can then be forced to testify. So that's the real reason, is that if they hadn't done that, Nick and Rondi wouldn't have testified, and there would have been no evidence of Alex's guilt whatsoever.
My last question in reference to that same aura as far as, protection. In moving forward in any trials, whether it's appeals 6 months from now or just these status hearings up until then, where you're hoping the judge is making the right decision based on the big picture, not just what the police are trying to portray. Do you feel that they're going to give Nick and Rondi the same gifts of immunity in another trial, in another round?
I don't think there's any doubt that they will. I mean, they don't have a choice, honestly. I mean, they have to have Nick and Rondi testify in order to have a case, period. There is literally no other evidence at all that can be pointed to as far as Alex's involvement with this crime goes. So they have to have Nick and Rondi. In order to do that, they're going to have immunity. Now, I do think that some legal technicality type issues around it, because of some of the stuff their attorney said, will be different in another trial. But at the end of the day, the question of immunity is, yes, they will have immunity, because there is no other choice for the state.
So now moving forward, as far as what we covered, or what you actually covered elegantly, and I've seen snippets because I'm getting, and I did want to run this past you also, because I have received snippets of like Zoom calls during certain meetings, which I didn't know if it was legal, because I didn't have time with everything going on and happening so fast, especially with our meeting today, I didn't have time to look to see if it was legal for me to post that stuff. You know, as far as giving the audience an inside look on them stalling out and basically unsure of their ruling, going back and forth, because I watched it. And as far as confidence in the trial, as far as like the judge and Sim and how they were interacting in your argument against immunity, it was I was not confident in the judge's
Yeah.
decision. So would that be, I guess, in the replay in the future, if me being a freelance reporter, would it be all right, or would it hurt your case? I'll take responsibility on my end as far as being a reporter, because I know what I can do or can't do. But as far as not hurting your case, would it be distasteful for me to put those online for people to see?
I mean, there's a couple different questions there. So, I mean, optically, not speaking legally, just optically, I don't think there's a problem, or not one I care about anyway. Legally speaking, it would be illegal to record that audio. However, this is the weird piece of this, is that that audio is also public and it is requestable from the court. So there's literally a form online that you can fill out, send to court, and get a CD, or not even CD anymore, that's the old way. You'll get a digital file of the audio from the hearing the court recorded, because all of it is recorded by the court. So it would be very easy for you or anybody to request that audio, and then once you have it, you can do whatever you want with it.
Gotcha. Okay, I just wanted to make sure, because my source that I was in contact with last night, we were having a back and forth, and I was like, I don't want to harm the case. Let me wait to talk to Brad first.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
the one problem would be is that when we were doing these the digital hearings and that, because of COVID, it was, I don't know if you even want to say law. I mean, I guess technically there's probably a law, because there's a law for everything, but it was technically against the law to record, like, from your computer, that, even though at the same exact time the court was recording it verbatim. So the only wrinkle I would say is whoever recorded it could potentially get in trouble. So the cleaner and easier way would be just request the audio from the court. It's a small fee. It's not very much. Once you have that, you can do whatever you want with it. There's no problem with that at all. So,
gotcha.
And it's probably a better quality audio as well.
Amen. You're absolutely right. I mean, because I do want to be able to show not a weird angle with a glare on the screen. You know what I mean? I'd rather have the natural. And with that being said, I guess part B of that question, I did request from you and the family the interrogations, and obviously that can't be done. So I am going to have to go through the courts to get, or the police department to get those interrogations. Now, if I'm able to get Nick and Rondi's interrogations, let's say within a couple of weeks, before 6 months, or whenever this starts really getting public and swinging, would it help you out for public opinion, if I was able to put that on there and show them on my end how much, excuse my French, how much bullshit the immunity is compared to what they said in the interrogation?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't think it would hurt. And I think if people can see, what was really said by these two witnesses for 6 hours, maybe a little bit longer, as far as their story, how that for that time they had stories that were consistent with each other, even though they were separated, which there's only two ways that happens. Either what they're saying is the truth, right? Because these two people witnessed something and they're apart from each other and they're now telling the truth, because the truth is the truth. Or these two people came up with a story and stuck to that story as when they were separated from each other. Because if one of them had changed, the other's not going to know, which is why when police interrogate more than one person, they're not together. You keep them separated. So if one says he was wearing a blue shirt, the other says it was red, you've got this inconsistency there. Or if one says, Alex was the shooter, and another one says somebody else was the shooter, you've got this thing, and we can then look at it and say, okay, well, why are they telling different stories if they saw the same thing? So, like I said, either the initial story was true, or they had spent some amount of time talking about what they were going to say so that they could keep that story consistent while they were apart. But then what you have is and why I will never quite understand, because it's a violation of every police procedure you could have, is they then put these two people together in a room and continue to interrogate. Well, once they're together, one person can change the story, and the other, all they have to do now is nod and say, yeah, that's what happened. And that's what we have here.
I agree. As far as the information that you sent me, you did send me a PowerPoint presentation. What I did to put it on StreamYard, because I couldn't get the whole PowerPoint thing. You know how you can click on the side to point up each one. So what I did is I basically brought it up so that we can basically just kind of scroll up through it. Mm-hmm. And if you want, you can kind of explain if you'd like, and I can pause as we go, but you can explain what it is you sent me, because I didn't want to try to get in your head. You know, it would be a disrespect for me to try to get in your head and figure out what you were trying to do with this. But if you could go over what we're looking at, so that way we have an idea of basically how, for those of us that didn't watch the trial or know, or that's brand new, that's watching, and for those of us that are just coming on, thank you for subscribing, thank you for watching, thank you for your support for baby Alex. But we just want to get in your see what your synopsis is about this and how you're mapping this out as far as a direction to see where this hits on target. So
yeah,
if you don't mind.
Absolutely. So this first one's obviously just a little icebreaker. It doesn't have anything obviously to do with the case, so we can move kind of past that to this next one. And this is where we start to get into kind of important stuff here. So, I mean, here's the thing: the state's case was purely based on two people who had told, I think at one point I counted almost 4 different versions of what happened that night, depending on what time and when they're being interrogated. And that was it. No physical evidence, no forensics, no anything that would tie Alex to this case. 2 witnesses. That's it. So what I tried to do is to show that our case, we didn't need testimony. We didn't need people who can, honestly misremember something or, dishonestly lie about something for whatever reason. Is that we could prove, with facts that weren't subject to interpretation as to how Alex wasn't guilty. And so this is the first time in closing that the jury actually gets to see this coherent timeline of what happened that night. And it's important. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that if you didn't follow the trial, you're not going to quite understand. But one of Nick and Rondi's stories throughout, after they decided to, use Alex's name in this case, was that they were afraid of Alex. And that's why it took them 6 to 8 hours or whatever to finally tell the truth. Is that they were just afraid of Alex. They didn't really know him. He hadn't been at their house. They didn't like him. They didn't know why he showed up. Somebody else invited him. Well, if you bring the timeline up and stuff, we can see that there's direct evidence that's not true. We actually have text messages from Nick to Alex that night, and we know exactly what time those were sent. So we've got that timeline that we're actually going past right now.
Oh, do I need to go back to it? I apologize.
Just a little bit, yeah. Just to start with.
Okay.
So, I'll kind of simplify it and get into where it's really important right now. The important time here is the one in red we see at 1:47 a.m. And what happens at 1:47 a.m. is that we know that Alex places a call to his mother. And this is the night that Emilio was shot, okay? At 1:47 a.m. We know that it's an absolute fact. Alex calls his mom at 1:47 in the morning. Now, there's 2 ways to look at this. There's our way to look at this, that at 1:47 a.m., Alex is in his car leaving Nick and Rondi's house, and he's calling his mother, who's watching his baby, to tell her he's on his way home. Or you could look at it as at 1:47, when I believe, and we'll look at in this next slide here, the shots are fired. Alex is calling his mother while he's shooting Emilio.
So, and this is the ring that we're looking at here that you're talking about.
So if we go to the ring, what we have here, so this is a ring video that is taken from across the street from where Emilio is shot, across the street from Nick and Rondi's house. These ladies also were having a little get together that night, just happened to be on their porch at this time. Now, if you look into the street right there, kind of with the street light, you see a white car driving by. Now, everybody, even Nick and Rondi, agree that Alex was driving a white Mercedes that night. And while we can't say, even Alex, when I asked him, can't tell me 100%, I can tell from this video that's my car. Fair enough. But again, if you look at the timestamp down there at the bottom, we have 1:47, and it correlates perfectly to the phone call that Alex places to his mother.
Which is the next slide right here.
Yes. And this is the police pulling data off cell towers and that to know that at 1:47, Alex places a phone call to his mother. And so is that just the video? Is that just a screenshot?
It's just a screenshot, but Sunshine did send me the actual video of the, and again, when me and my team first saw it, it's very grainy. It's obviously a Ring camera from a distance, but you can definitely see the muzzle flashes.
Yes.
And from my perspective, it didn't look like the flashes were coming from a vehicle.
No. I mean, I think if you look closely at that, and I mean, I would encourage you to put that up and let people download it and look at it themselves and play with it. But you can clearly see what I think, and I think everyone else I've shown that to and had a look at it, is muzzle flashes from across the street. I think what that video captures is the exact moment at which Emilio is shot on that night. There's really no other way to explain flashes, one, that are that quick in time. When you slow it down and play it in slow motion, those flashes are less than a second. That would be that bright from that distance. I mean, there's, I don't know, 100 to 200 yards, maybe a little bit more distance, and we're picking up those flashes on that Ring camera. So it's a bright and it's a quick flash. I'd say it's gunshots. Now this, if we look at 1:52, we can see right there again is a white car that looks, I would say, identical to the car that drives by in the Ring video. And if you kind of do the math on a map, this camera, this car wash, is basically about 3 to 5 minutes away, which, as you look at the timestamp you have. So again, Alex is gone from the scene at 1:52. He's now away from the house.
Now, as far as pausing right here, the shots that you see in the camera, just to be clear for the audience, when you say across the street, you're saying across the street from where the ladies were and their perception from their house, not somebody was shooting from across the street at Emilio,
Correct. Yeah, right. So Emilio, Nick, Rondi, whoever else is across the street from the Ring video. That's where the shooting happens. It just so happens the Ring video, that Ring camera is pointed in the right direction to pick those up.
So, and then I guess the next slide we're going to go into is the debate on, we don't know who or how the bullet struck Emilio, but there was a question about his body being struck and then being a slide mark. And I guess Nick claimed that he did not pull the body.
So if you look at this slide right here, clearly at the top up there towards the garbage can, you have that large pile of blood, right? or pool of blood. So that is where Emilio's head is when police arrive on scene, is up there, and it's what explains for the large amount of blood. That's where he's been laying. But if you look down towards the bottom, before you get to that pool, clearly what you have is direction. That body is moved up the driveway, right? And if we zoom in on the darker trail, I mean, clearly the trail on the right is blood. If we zoom in on that darker trail, though, what becomes clearly apparent is, oh, that is hair. That is hair and scalp material.
Oh my
that
God.
is left on the driveway. And there's not really any question about that. I mean, anybody, literally anybody looking at these photos can tell you that is human hair. And the police even have a diagram from that night where they list hair as being on the driveway. So they don't even question the fact that that is hair. And so what you clearly have here is evidence of the body being moved from one place to another. I mean, there's no other way to look at that. You can see it's a blood trail, like, and then also there's human hair being left behind. And if we keep going, I think one more. Oh no,
I think this is Nick that you.
This is Nick. Did we? I know I don't remember if there. I may have done it with actual pictures and not in this PowerPoint, but there's a picture, and if you give me 1 sec, I can probably pull this up real quick to explain that just a little bit better. Let's see. Can I put something on the screen through this app? Like if I do present, will that work?
It should. I've never tried, but yeah, go right on ahead.
Let me give me 1 sec to pull something up, and then let's see if I share my screen. Chrome's gonna give me 1 sec while I see if. If I do that, it's going to make me quit Chrome. Anyway, let me just say this. There is, from the medical examination of the body of Emilio Salazar, there is a approximately 2 centimeter wide gash in the back of his head where he is missing hair and scalp that would perfectly align with the hair and scalp that is on that driveway.
Give me a moment. I might actually have that photo from Sunshine.
Well, and you know what else I could do? Give me 1 sec. I thought I had a printed copy of that handy, but I don't. So, but
you're
anyway,
good. On the re-edit, I'll go ahead and overlay it because I know I have that picture. I know which one you're talking about. So
anyway, there's a picture that clearly shows this 2 centimeter gash in the back of Emilio's head that clearly aligns with what would have happened if somebody would have drugged him up that driveway with his head on the ground. And so, yeah, there you have, I mean, I would say almost unquestionable evidence that body was moved after he was shot. And Nick testified that he didn't touch the body. And he also testified that his testimony was that Alex shot Emilio and immediately got in his car and left. So Alex didn't touch the body. And the only one really left at the scene would have been Nick. So Nick drugged that body up the driveway. There's no other conclusion that can be come to from that.
This is what you're talking about?
There you go. So it does not, I don't believe, take a medical expert or a forensic expert or anything like that to put those three pictures together and figure out what happened there.
Absolutely. Man, that is crazy. Now, this next slide that we have on here that you showed us is in regards to
Nick.
To Nick himself. If you want to expound on this a little bit.
Yeah. So going back to that 2013 incident in which somebody was killed and Nick's brother ended up taking the rap, the thing that Nick ended up pleading to is that he shot his mother-in-law on that night as well. So,
so his mother-in-law was at the party, the birthday party?
Somehow was there. And I should also probably point out, I guess, at the night that happened, he and Rondi were not married, although they became married very quickly afterwards. So I guess technically, if I want to be precise, it wasn't his mother-in-law on that night, but she became his mother-in-law. So that is the person that he pled to essentially recklessly endangering by accidentally shooting her.
Go ahead.
He then, and this is a whole long story, but suffice it to say that two of the state's witnesses who were also at the party that night, who testified kind of in contradiction to what Nick and Rondi said, ended up being the victims of a drive-by later while this case is pending, and Nick Valdez has been charged with committing that drive-by.
Jesus, the hits just keep on coming.
Yeah.
And this guy, and him being, even with this history of him being, quote unquote, a menace to society, or, however you want to look at it. I don't understand why immunity. All right, well, let's get into this before we go any further into this. Let's talk about the rumor of there being a parallel case that Nick was involved in, that the DA basically was trying to juggle, because from my understanding, they needed his reputation as a witness for a parallel crime. I don't know if it happened while he was incarcerated.
So that's the drive-by, right? That's the drive-by against these other two witnesses. That's the crime. So he does that, and I mean, I guess I should say allegedly, if we're going to be precise, because he hasn't been convicted. But there's eyewitness testimony. There's cell phone data that puts him at the location of the drive-by at the time that it happened. And there's shell casing found in his car when the cops go to look into it, because the witnesses described him and described a vehicle that he was driving that they didn't know he owned or anything, that they then find in the driveway when they go to his house. So it's a pretty compelling case, to say the least, as far as if he was the one that did this drive-by. And
so sorry to interrupt you. So in a nutshell, there is a public conflict of interest with him.
Yes.
Interfering with judicial proceedings with a drive-by, obviously, or whatever, however you want to label it.
Yeah.
And what's going on here. So for the DA to try to, and as far as the chessboard, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like the DA basically put a position on the board to where it was a no-lose situation for them. I mean, they had you checkmated whether or not, because your hands were tied behind your back, because you could not talk about, with his immunity, you could not demoralize him in front of the jury. But at the same time, they still had all these officers in there trying to portray Alex like he was the kingpin of Utah. So there's this conflict of interest going on where the state's looking at you like, well, what are you going to do? I mean, what can you say? What can you do? We have all the corners played out.
Right. And I mean, that's the case in any trial or any criminal proceeding, is the state is the one that has all the power. They're the ones that they get to decide who gets immunity and who doesn't. And they're the ones that decide what witness is lying and what witness isn't lying. right? So a
Yeah.
state witness gets up there and says something that they have evidence isn't true. I mean, they have physical evidence. It can't possibly be true. They know it's not true. The person's never going to get charged with the crime. They're not going to get charged with perjury or obstruction of justice. But someone who supports the defense gets up there and says something that may honestly be true, but the state doesn't like it, and they can charge them with perjury or obstruction or any other number of things. And, that's the power of the state.
And obviously, this is like perfect timing because obviously this is what he was granted with that immunity.
Yeah.
So now, now let's get into the meat and potatoes. So I know what this is, but I would love for you to explain Exhibit 43 to us and how it ended up in this evidence ended up in Nick's possession and not Alex's possession.
So when the cops on the night of this incident, the cops are called, they find Emilio's body in the driveway. They search Nick's house, and under a mattress in Nick's house, they find 40 caliber bullets and 40 caliber and a magazine that also has 40 caliber bullets in it. The significance of that is the gun that was used to kill Emilio, or at least the gun that left the bullet in Emilio's head, is a 40 caliber gun. It was a 40 caliber that was used. So we have bullets and a magazine to a 40 caliber in Nick's possession.
And they got immunity. Yeah. So let's dive a little bit into Rondi, if you don't mind, and as far as your opinion on her, and because before you go in, I just, so you know, I have a very big disdain for this one. This one, in my opinion, is a big shit starter. I've seen her online. I've checked her profile, and the thing that eats me up is when I did my background check on her, and I'm not going to expose, her address or anything like that, but when I did the background check on her, her criminal record was just as scrubbed as his was. And as you can see here, let me make this a little bigger here. So you can see here, everything is, there's no case numbers, but you can see where she was locked up.
Yeah.
So as far as immunity, is this a common thing where the state will actually get involved?
And I can't really speak to how common it is, or if that's what happened here or whatever. I just don't know, and I don't have the answers, and I don't want to speculate on it because I don't know. So I want to be very honest with people. When I know something, I'll tell them, and when I don't, I want that to have some credibility. I don't know the answer to that question.
The other thing that we saw too is that on her record, she has a charge for controlled substance spice on her background. Is there any way to use that as like a leverage pendulum to kind of discredit their immunity? Or
I mean, not really. I mean, in order, it's let me say it's complicated. The simple rule, and there's some exceptions, but the simple rule is, in court, if someone's testifying, the rules really only allow you to question them about a crime that has to do with honesty. So like perjury or some other kind of lying type crime, even if it's a misdemeanor. Hold on a sec. I got muted again. So if it's not something that has to do with honesty, then it has to be a felony. And if it's not, and even if it's a felony, it has to be within 10 years. So when you're looking at these other, drug possession stuff like that, it's not as easy to be able to bring up in a trial. There may be ways to do it depending, but something like spice possession probably isn't going to be allowed as far as cross-examination of a witness.
Gotcha.
What's the address of the emergency?
It's up on 17 South.
Okay, 17 South and what?
California.
Okay, and what's going on over there?
Somebody's just been shot.
Okay, let me put you on with the fire department. Don't hang up, okay?
Yeah.
Fire department's the address of the emergency.
What's the address? 1172 West California Avenue.
Okay, tell me the address one more time for verification, please.
1172 1172 West California Avenue.
Thank you. What's the phone number you're calling from?
801.
Okay.
I really don't know the number that I'm
If you don't know the number, that's fine. Tell me what's going on there.
Somebody's just been shot.
Are you with them?
Right now, yes.
How old are they?
I think he's about 30, 32.
Okay. Is he awake?
He's over there breathing heavy.
Is the attacker still nearby?
No.
Do you know where they went?
I don't.
Okay. Is there any serious bleeding?
Yes.
Okay. Is he completely alert?
No, he's unconscious. Fucking up on the floor right now.
He's unconscious now? Okay.
Yes.
Is there more than one wound?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm sending the paramedics to help you now. Stay in line. I'll tell you exactly what to do next. I'm going to tell you how to stop the bleeding. Listen carefully to make sure we do it right. I want you to clean dry cloth or towel and tell me when you have it.
Okay. I have it.
All right. I want you to place it right on the wound and press down firmly. If there's multiple wounds, I want you to press down on both places.
Okay.
Where are the wounds?
I don't know.
Where is he bleeding from? Is it from his torso? Is it from his arm?
I don't know.
You can't tell where he's bleeding from?
No.
Okay. Are you able to see a place where you can press down to stop the bleeding?
I can't.
Okay. How many gunshots did you hear?
I don't know.
You don't know?
Somebody drove by and did it. I don't know.
Okay. Did you see the suspect at all?
No, I didn't.
How long ago did this happen?
I don't know.
I know this is very stressful. We have help on the way.
Okay,
Any
bye.
information? Sir, stay on the line with...
All right. And obviously we see this again, this get out of jail free card, because if they didn't have immunity, obviously both of them would be looking probably at jail time for their involvement.
Yeah.
So
And
as
so-
far, I guess this is Rhonda's timeline that we're looking at coming up.
Yeah. So this breaks down depending on the day and the time of day at which she's interviewed by the police and what she has to say. So if we start at 2:36 a.m., this is body camera footage from the night of the incident, and this is the first interaction police have with Rondi on that night. And as far as grandma requesting stuff, I would encourage you to also attempt to ask for the video, the body camera video from that night, so you can show that too. But
Okay.
when she comes, back onto the scene, her first statements to police are, "I didn't see the shooter." And that's one thing, people can lie. But what you see in the body camera video is that as the police tell her that Emilio was shot, she literally falls to the ground uncontrollably crying, saying she didn't know anybody had been shot at the house. So I guess there's two ways to look at that. There is the way I kind of look at it, in that either she's just this amazing actress who can just put on this performance on cue, or going back to her statements from the night of, she actually didn't know Emilio got shot. I don't, you can kind of pick which one of those works for you. But the performance is pretty amazing. When you see her fall down to the ground and start crying when the cops tell her Emilio was shot. And then the other thing she tells the police is that when she heard the shots that she thinks is a drive-by, in her words, she just ran away, and she ran through the church parking lot. Okay. That's important, and I'll get into why in just a second. So then what we have is we have her first interview with the police. She's separated from Nick at this point. They're at the police station in different rooms, and the police are interviewing her about what happened. And again, she goes with this. She didn't see the shooter. She didn't see Emilio get shot. She ran to the church, and Nick was drinking liquor this night, and he does not. Her testimony, or well, her statement was, that's unusual. Nick doesn't drink liquor, because when he does, he just blacks out. So he doesn't do it. Then we have the police then leave her alone for a while. They go talk to Nick, again separated, and they come back to Rondi. So this is a second interview at the police station. She didn't see the shooter. She ran to the church. Nick was drinking liquor. And then this other witness is Stephanie is gone before the shooting happens. Okay. They leave her alone again, go talk to some other people. And at this point now, they put Nick and Rondi in the same room together with each other. And again, at this point on the night of, she's saying she didn't see the shooter. She ran to the church when she heard the shots, and Nick was drinking liquor. So from 2:36 a.m. when she's on body camera until this interview with Nick, her story is the same. Doesn't change. Well, this is the same interview where Nick now says, okay, I did see the shooter. It was Alex. He shot Emilio. That's basically all he has to say. The cops say, thank you very much for telling us the truth. You can go home now. And they leave. So then, yeah, and I'm literally not exaggerating. When you get that, you can read it. You can see I'm not exaggerating that. That's pretty much how it goes. Thank you for being honest. You can go home. And then they start talking about how to get home. So then a few days later, they bring him back in to ask follow-up questions they should have asked the night of, because someone's just told you that, they witnessed this murder and saw exactly who did it. And they do not bother to ask questions about, like, well, how did he get there? When did he get there? What was he driving? Where did the gun come from? What did he do with the gun? They don't bother to ask literally any of those questions, which I'm sure you can understand is a problem. So then they come back on the 14th. They give another interview, and that is.
Should I move up the slide, or are we still on the timeline?
Well, you can stay on the timeline for just a sec.
Okay.
So now what we have is, well, actually, I didn't go to the church when I ran away. And this witness, Stephanie, she brought Alex with her when she came. Well, here's what's important about why she didn't go to the church. On the next morning after this shooting, the police are still on scene. They're still searching the neighborhood. At the church that is immediately next door to Nick and Rondi's house, they find a gun in the bushes. Now, the gun they find isn't 40 caliber, so we know that it's not the gun that killed Emilio. But it is literally right next door. It is also in the location where Rondi, in 4 different statements to the police, says she went after the shooting. Well, what she knows a couple of days later when they bring her back to interview her is that the police found that gun. So now all of a sudden, I didn't go to the church, because she knows what was found at the church. And she denies that they ever had a gun in the house or that she put a gun at the church. Denies it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the police are just straight-faced, knowing that she's jumping back and forth, and they're not calling her on her bullshit.
They do not call her on it. They don't even attempt to challenge her about any of these things. And then over a year later, they do another interview. This is just a couple days before the trial is supposed to happen. So they do another interview with Rondi, and now she's back to, okay, I did go to the church. I did take the gun and hide it in the bushes.
Jesus. So in essence, what we have here, as far as even with immunity and I guess confession, as far as there being another gun, a different gun that was involved, whether it was fired or not, because there was no, I'm assuming there was no testing as far as DNA to see if it was Alex's gun or if
Well,
it was
no, I mean, they did. So they fingerprint and DNA test the 380 at our request, actually, the defense's request. They weren't going to do this until we asked them to do it. They do that, and Alex's DNA is nowhere on it. Nick and Rondi's DNA is all over it. So there was no question. I mean, one, it was never a question anyway, but two, the forensics bear it out. It was their gun.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, from my understanding.
Sorry, let me correct that. I want to be precise. They didn't find the DNA on the gun. They found it on the shirt the gun was wrapped in, and then on a sock had a bunch of 380 bullets in it. So not the gun itself, but
everything else.
Shirt
Yeah,
it
doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that the outside material is the last thing that was touched. Obviously they had to place it inside of it. So we obviously know who's the last one to touch that weapon. As far as precursor, I'm understanding that there were people saying that there was conflict of who was invited and who was not invited as far as going to Nick's house, right around the time of the incident. From my understanding from Alex's mother, Sunshine, I did get in correspondence with her, and I did see a whole bunch of stuff she sent me as far as also on the podcast. She had like the slideshow ready to show the text messages and the timestamps. I mean, this woman is phenomenal as far as protecting her son and making sure that everybody knows the truth. She shows in these text messages where Nick was basically harassing. I wouldn't say harassing, but was basically trying to submit Alex to go over there to hang out, emotionally calling him Cuddy and, I got your back, all kinds of stuff. And when I look at it, and again, I'm street savvy. I'm not in the streets, you know what I mean? In that lifestyle. Right. But when I read between the lines and see it, it sounds like cousin Nick was like trying to get younger cousin over there because there was like some kind of beef or dirt or something that he wanted to do that he couldn't do alone. And my impression was when Alex got over there and found out really what it was, because obviously there were beers on the table, and they were there to party or whatever. But from my perception, it looks like maybe Alex was brought into a side room and they were going to jack Emilio, or that was Nick's plan. And Alex was like, yo, I'm not into, despite what I look like, I'm not about that life. I just had a baby. He left, and then it looks like Nick just went ahead and did it anyway.
Yeah, and there's a couple, I think, unanswered questions that, and I suppose it's that way with any crime. There's things that only some people know, and they're never going to tell, and we're never going to know the whole story, right? But clearly, when you look at not just this night, but other nights, Nick and Rondi had at least some form of relationship with Alex. He had been to their house to watch fights. Their daughters have been to Alex's house for birthday parties and for other things. So there's some connection here. There's no evidence to support this idea that they were just so afraid of Alex they had to lie to the police because they were so afraid of him, and that they didn't invite him to the house that night and that somebody else invited him. That's all just nonsense, and it's not supported. So why Nick wanted Alex there that night, I have no idea. I'm guessing only Nick and Emilio maybe could answer that question, but there's no doubt that Nick and Rondi's story about them having to lie because they were afraid of Alex is not true, and that they didn't invite Alex. Absolutely not true.
Gotcha. Now, who is this Stephanie Jensen?
So Stephanie Jensen is another person that's at the party at Nick and Rondi's house the night of the shooting. She's again in some way related to Alex, and I forget the exact family connection, but they're somehow at least distantly related to Alex. So, and this is so on Rondi's 5th or 6th whatever interview, her story is now, well, Stephanie invited Alex. Well, Stephanie did not invite Alex. One of the things Stephanie said is that, you know, Rondi had a gun. Another thing that Stephanie makes out very clearly is that Nick was just this jealous and controlling husband. And that also on the night this happened, Rondi is all over Emilio. And she also makes out the fact that it is very possible that Alex had actually left before the shots were fired, that she can't say for certain one way or the other. And I'll be completely honest, at one point she gave a statement where she said she thought Alex was there. But then, you know, she was also extremely intoxicated that night. And on further thinking about it, she did say her last memory of Alex before the shots was him going to the car. So it was a possibility that, you know, her memory just wasn't perfect and that he was gone. Dominique, same kind of situation. She's Stephanie's sister, also there the night this happens.
So basically the same context. She didn't invite.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Looks like the only difference is that she didn't see Nick's old lady with a pistol.
Right. That's exactly right.
Okay.
So Socorro, she's also at the party, although everybody agrees she is gone before the shooting happens. She took Nick and Rondi's kids and left the house to go to her house so that her kids and their kids could hang out. So, but a couple of important things that she brought to this is that she did hear Nick talking to Alex on the phone before Alex ever got to the house. So again, showing that Nick clearly did invite him and that Nick was talking to him. She saw Nick showing pictures of Alex to Emilio before Alex got to the house. She makes out that Nick was drinking liquor. Emilio went into the bedroom. This is the bedroom where they ended up finding the magazine and the bullets. So, I mean, I think it's at least a possibility that if you have a magazine and bullets, you probably also have a gun, but you know, and that Alex arrives after Stephanie and Dominique to, you know, kind of refute this idea that they brought Alex with them. So, and then these next couple of slides just go through what evidence is lacking.
Well, we talked about it as far as his DNA not being on the soccer shirt.
Yep, or on anything. You know, the police, you know, they have Nick and Rondi in custody, in quotation marks, the night this happens, and they don't bother to do any kind of gunshot residue testing on either of their hands or on Emilio's hands. Well, actually, let me phrase that. They do gunshot residue on Emilio's hands, but that is somewhat redundant as Emilio was wearing gloves on the night this happened. When the police arrived on scene and he is transported away, he has gloves on. So the gunshot residue on his hands wouldn't have mattered because he was wearing gloves. But they don't bother to do it on Nick and Rondi.
Is there any way to test for gunshot residue on the gloves, or did they do
Absolutely. That? If they had the gloves, they could have tested them. No question.
And that's the whole issue, is that these gloves that everybody knows were there have disappeared.
And it's gloves that we know Emilio was wearing because we can see it in the body camera video from the police. And we also know that from Dominique and Stephanie, they saw Nick and Emilio with these gloves earlier in the night as well.
Jeez. Wow. Well, let's keep going with this.
One of the pieces of evidence, and if you want to say this is a piece of evidence that they had, probably the only actual piece of evidence, is they had a Snapchat video from Alex's Snapchat account that showed him driving in a car, and in the cup holder between the driver and passenger seat, you can see a handgun in the car. Now, they claimed that they could prove that was taken on the night that Emilio was murdered. As I pointed out in trial, live in court with Snapchat, if I upload a video to Snapchat that I took even months ago, Snapchat will say that it was taken right now. So in court with the state's expert who's supposedly proving the Snapchat video, I uploaded to Snapchat a video of my daughter playing in her swing. It had been taken months before trial, and Snapchat then recorded it as having happened right then and there. And so it's just proof that I can take a video from any point I've ever had a video, I can upload it into Snapchat, and Snapchat's going to say the video is date stamped on that day and time. But the other point here is, okay, you see a gun in the console, but can you tell if it's real or fake? Because right here on that first slide, 2 of the 4 guns are fake and 2 are real. And in this one of those is real and 1 is fake. Their expert could not tell me which one was real and which one was fake from those
to tell
pictures.
you the truth, I was sitting here when you sent it to me. I was looking at it too, and I'm not an aficionado on guns, but I do own, my own guns.
Yeah.
And I go to the range regularly. So I like to say that if I saw one flash in front of me, I would know whether to panic or not. I couldn't tell the difference. Looking,
No.
I got up close and was looking for like BB gun emblems or something. I couldn't tell.
You can't. And in fact, live in court, I had one of these exact same guns that was the BB gun version, and let the officer look at it, touch it, everything, and he couldn't tell me if it was real or fake. That's actually holding the thing. He couldn't tell, and yet somehow can tell from this. I mean, the time the Snapchat video is on the screen, or the guns on the video in the Snapchat video, was seconds. I mean, it can somehow tell
I know
that it's a real gun, and
gotcha.
that's kind of
and
this goes into.
I know you're pressed for time.
Can't say if that video was actually taken on the night this happened and Alex had a gun that night, or if it just so happened that he uploaded a video to Snapchat that night from some other time.
Understandable.
There's no way to tell.
Now, I want to make sure that you're not pressed for time because I know you have a busy schedule. Are we cool to talk for another 10 minutes or so? Or
sorry, I missed that last part. Real.
Are you still available to talk for another 10 minutes or so, or are you?
Yeah,
do you have to get going? Okay.
No, we're good. We can keep going for a little bit. So
okay. So as far as this next clip, it says cannot say when the video was taken. This is what you're talking about as far as the Snapchat.
Yeah, this is what I'm talking about.
Now, I don't know if I have to go through all of these because they look like the same picture, but if you want to expound on what we're looking at.
Yeah, and it's going to be kind of hard to do here, but what I'll just point out is, so what these were is when each of these witnesses, you got the name at the top, were testifying in court, the state had them fill out these maps with where everybody was when the shooting happened. And
gotcha.
What you can see pretty clearly is nobody can agree where everybody was when this happened. Every one of them is different.
So just to make sure that we're clear on focus, how many people were actually there when Emilio was killed?
So as far as the testimony goes, we had Nick and Rondi, Emilio, Stephanie and Dominique, Alex, his girlfriend, and then there's this one other person who's named Tommy, who is there, but everybody kind of agrees was in the bathroom at the time it happened and doesn't see anything. So I think 8 is about the number we're at.
And the only people that got interrogated were Nick and Rondi.
And Tommy did too, but he very much the entire time stuck to the fact he was in the bathroom when it happened and didn't see what happened.
You see this bitch here? Do not fucking try this shit. This motherfucker's hot. I just fucking yacked him all over the fucking place. This motherfucker's hot. You can't have your stomach hold this motherfucker down. This shit's fucking hot. God damn.
And would his interrogation be available also, or?
It would. I mean, you could request it, although honestly, it's very uninteresting.
It's not that. I'll probably skip
So,
it then. I don't want to waste time.
It doesn't really lend anything one side or the other to this case.
Credence. Gotcha.
So, yeah.
Okay. And this is kind of what we've, in a nutshell, everything that you talked about as far as what's available and not available as far as evidence.
Yeah. So this, when I say oversights, these are things that the police didn't notice or bother to do. So one of the things that the gun that is found at the church, it's a .380 caliber handgun. The magazine that is found with that gun, that goes to the gun, no question, has a round in the top of the magazine that has a primer strike. Now, what that means is that round was in the chamber of the gun, the trigger was pulled, and it just didn't go off. It was a dud, essentially. The police don't notice this. I notice this. We tell them about it, and they eventually decide, oh, well, maybe we should test this. And they do test fire the round, meaning they put that round in the gun and fired it, and it wouldn't go off. So that round was truly a dud. Well,
so just to make sure we're clear, is it possible that she would have been involved in whatever altercation happened with the firearms? It's just her gun jammed. And so she got scared and ran because she couldn't shoot. I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Hang on. Sorry. I don't know. My computer keeps randomly muting itself.
You're good.
Yeah, I think the only real conclusion is that somehow that round was taken out of the gun and put back into the magazine. Now, anybody that has anything to do with firearms knows if that happened at any other point in time, that round isn't getting put back into that gun. Like if you're at the range and you have a round that doesn't go off, you're not going to say, oh, I'm going to put that back in the magazine.
Kill it.
It's gonna get thrown away. I think what is more likely, and I think there's a million different ways you could draw a scenario in your head, but for whatever reason, someone attempted to fire that .380 the night this happened. It did not go off. Rondi, and removing that .380 from the scene again for whatever reason, takes that bullet out of the chamber, puts it in the magazine, and then hides it that night. That's what explains the dud. But again, it's something the police didn't even notice. They had never noticed it till we brought it to their attention. Hair on the driveway, no one bothers to pick up that hair, preserve it, potentially test it to see, is this Emilio's hair? Is it the shooter's hair? I mean, who knows? There's hair. Who knows whose hair it could be? Now, I think what's clear when you put it all together is that it's Emilio's hair, but still, at the time, the police may not have known that, and they could have picked it up and tested it. They don't bother to. No gunshot residue testing on Nick or Rondi, even though they're there at the police station the night of. We see these other injuries in the autopsy. They note him in the autopsy. They take a picture of him. There's bruising on Emilio's legs, on his arms, these other bruises that are noted. No one asks questions about him. There's no investigation into how those came about, because even if you take what Nick and Rondi were to say is true, if you just count everything out, say, okay, what Nick and Rondi said is true, Alex shot this guy, nothing accounts for these other injuries in their story. They don't ever say these two were in some kind of fist fight and hitting each other or anything like that. So where do these other injuries on Emilio come from then? No one looks into it.
Right.
They don't
and as far as the possibilities of the injuries, one, like you said, it could have been a prior fight or an incident that happened right before the shooting, or it could have been when they were not dragging the body. Right,
exactly. So again, but no one bothers to look into it. So it's very clear that they know what car Alex was driving that night. No one disputes it at all. They ask very clear questions that it was this white Mercedes that Alex owned. When they go and arrest Alex at his home, that white Mercedes that they believe he was driving that night is in the driveway. Well, they don't bother to even look in it. Not only do they not search it, they don't even look in it. And again, if you'd believed somebody had fled the scene directly after shooting somebody, you could have done gunshot residue testing in that car, on the steering wheel, on the handle, and other places to see if you found gunshot residue in there. It would be a pretty good sign that that person had just fired a gun before they got in their car. Is it proof positive? No. But would it help the state's case? Absolutely it would. So it's a little, suspicious that they didn't do it. I mean, you could have, again, if you're taking the state that Alex did this, maybe the murder weapon's in that car. If that's the car he drove away, and you're not even going to look to see, so that seems a little suspicious again. Like they weren't really conducting an investigation here. Like they just made up their mind and didn't really care, or they didn't want the chance of disproving what they believed. They don't bother collecting the gloves from Emilio. And yeah, so those are just some of the major oversights that happen in this case.
Gotcha. And then this last slide here, I'm assuming this was for the jury.
Yeah, this is for the jury. We talk about beyond a reasonable doubt. What does that mean? What degree of certainty do you have to have that somebody is guilty before you convict them? So
let me go back.
and that's that's kind of the case in a nutshell. I mean, obviously it's a super condensed version of it. But what I think should be concerning for everybody, and look, this is true, and if maybe you for some reason think that Alex did this, for whatever reason, maybe you believe that. The scary part is that somebody could be convicted with evidence like this, even if they look, and I would say this, even if they did it, it's scary that somebody could be convicted on what was presented to this jury, because the only evidence that Alex shot Emilio is the testimony of witnesses who the state 100% knows is lying. There's no even at trial, they know they are lying, because Nick says, I'm trying to remember, but I can say this. Nick says he gave $380 to Rondi and she ran away with it. And Rondi says she went into the house, got the gun, and then ran away with it. Or that could be the other way around. Not important. The point is, you have two witnesses telling completely different stories. They both cannot possibly be true. There's no way in which our reality exists as far as the laws of physics go, in which Rondi was either handed the gun and ran away, or herself went into the house and got that gun. Well, okay, these witnesses are lying. It under oath, in trial testimony, they're lying. So you have lying witnesses, and that's what someone's convicted on. And look, if you didn't have the gunshots on tape, if you didn't have proof that at 1:47, when we say Alex's car is driving away, he's on the phone with his mother. Just what is more realistic? That Alex is in that car, leaving the scene, talking to his mom, or that he's talking to his mom as he's shooting somebody? Those are your really two options to explain the actual evidence in this case. Well, come on. It's simple in a lot of ways. It's real simple to figure out this case.
So as far as the questions from the audience, Utah Defender has one here that we didn't cover, as far as triangulation of Alex's phone to prove that he left for the murder. We know that you were able to do that as far as talking to his mom in the ring cam. Was there anything done as far as pings on satellite to show that he was not near it?
Here's the problem, is that as he's driving away, he is still so close that they can't be more accurate than that, right?
So yeah, because it's like a relay race. You have to make it to the next marker.
Yes. And so when we're talking about, not just minutes, but potential seconds worth of time here, you were not going to get more accurate than, in that map. I think one of the maps you showed, they had the circle. It's a mile or two in that densely populated of an area with that many towers. The best they're going to be able to do is about a mile or two. It's close enough that that car could still be in the driveway, or it could be a mile away. We don't know.
And the hard part is the reasonable doubt or reasonable circumstance or that whether that he could be there or not is going to be up in the air with the jury as far as who's convincing, whether your closing argument or Gill's closing argument.
Yeah, well, and sorry, I missed part of that, but let me just be clear. So Sim Gill wasn't the actual trial attorney.
Well, I'm sorry, not Gill. I misspoke. Gill's representative speaking.
Yeah.
I don't know the attorney that's going to work for him. But I guess what it comes down to is your guys' closing argument. And I guess yours is going to be for them to see through the immunity and the lies, even though they're not going to be held accountable for those lies. Your job kind of is easy because they know they have immunity. So they're just going to say whatever looks bad for Alex. And your job is basically to say, yeah, that's not what the evidence says. And we understand you have immunity, but this is actually what it says. So obviously either nobody's going to jail, or we're going to have to find out civilly how to get back at you two, even with immunity, if that's able to be done.
Right. And I mean, the other point of this too, look, if I'm right, and Nick is actually responsible for what happened that night, his only option was to stick with the story that he had told. He had to say Alex did it. In order to keep his immunity, he had to agree with the state. The state's, like I said earlier, the one that gets to decide if you're telling the truth or not. So his immunity is based on telling the truth. The person who gets to decide if you're telling the truth is the state. So the only way he was going to keep his immunity and potentially keep himself out of trouble was to say Alex did it. And and just the different inconsistencies, the fact that nothing matches the evidence, it's just so easy to see somebody's lying. And I've said this before Alex's case, and I continue to maintain it after Alex's case. The hard part in a trial with a lying witness, a witness who is truly willing to look somebody in the eye and lie for whatever reason, in this case, probably to keep yourself from going to prison, but you're willing to lie, even in the face of physical evidence. We as human beings are designed to trust. And there's a number of reasons for that. A basic one is evolution. Our ancestors who made it to pass their genes on to get to us are those that were able to cooperate with others. If you couldn't cooperate when you were living on the savannah in a tribe, you died fairly quickly. Like, your only option was to work with others and cooperate. So we are literally geared through evolution to get along and to trust one another. We just are. It's how we are built. If we weren't, we wouldn't be here. So for some reason, juries are so hesitant to believe that somebody is getting on that stand, raising their hand, taking an oath to tell the truth, and then lying to them, except for the defendant. They'll completely believe a defendant is lying to them. And that's the hard part of a lying witness, is that it is extremely hard to get a jury to understand they are being lied to, even when those lies fly in the face of actual evidence. Juries do not like it, and that it's very hard when you're going up against somebody who is completely willing to lie and continue to lie even when they're presented with proof of their lies.
That's a very dangerous person, especially with the fact that she has nothing to lose for the most part, and she's still willing not to tell the truth. I think the whole purpose of immunity is saying, look, we know you had some part in it, whether you killed him or your boyfriend killed him or husband, whatever you want to call him, or somebody else at the party did it. Now's the time to tell the truth, because your life will continue with no consequences, but you're still doubling down.
Yeah,
it's kind of frustrating. So I'm just kind of going through, I know we're going to wrap it up here because I know you're busy. I'm just kind of going through these questions to make sure everybody has a chance to be seen here. I'm noticing some very good ones that we missed because I was so engaged in talking with you. These questions and comments keep piling up here. But one of the ones that I saw as far as was the one about Rondi, and you had made a point about her collapsing to the ground when she found out that Emilio was killed, and it kind of flashed back. Of course, she fell to the ground. If the rumor is that they were, having an affair or whatever, of course she felt some type of way, and that's all the more reason for Nick to do something.
Yeah.
So, but like you said, as far as anything else is concerned, I can't tell you enough how appreciative, Brad, I am of you coming on here and clearing up the facts. And I usually have a stigma against defense attorneys talking about the trial, because I covered the Tyree Nichols case, and I saw, the idiots get on the stand and start talking before all the evidence was presented.
Yeah.
And then I was quoting what the defense attorneys were saying, and then I was going back on the videos, like the videos don't match. You can see them punching Tyree. But in this case, I agree with you 100% as far as exposure. If the system is broken and law enforcement is inept or neutered or whatever have you for political reasons, or just a lack of training or whatever have you, whatever the issue is, I think public exposure is probably the best medicine as far as trying to make sure that even if we're not successful with baby Alex, at least we have something on notice where we're starting a pattern to where we can have reflection and correction.
Yeah.
So,
and I mean, I think the other important thing too is we all would like to think that it kind of works the way it does on CSI or Law and Order, and that, cops maybe have an idea of who did it and they start looking into it, and then, okay, well, that person didn't do it because we have this piece of evidence. But this case glaringly shows that's not how it works, that they make their conclusion and then disregard any evidence that does not support that conclusion. And it's dangerous. It's dangerous. So,
well,
I appreciate the chance to come on and talk to you. So
anytime, and in the future, if you have any other cases that you need exposed like this, obviously you see how I format and I try to be organized and roll and, and try to ask intelligent questions and not just, be on here for views. In the future, if you feel like you want to talk, or if you don't mind, I would love to keep you on standby and be able to bounce ideas off of you as far as other cases that are high profile and get your professional opinion, because I'm reading these, not to gas you up, but I'm reading these comments about you. And I'm also, from what I know prior, the family loves you to death. And as far as my background on you, your reputation is impeccable, thus far. So I just want to congratulate you on what you're doing. So.
Okay. Well, thank you. And yeah, I'm happy to answer questions for you in the future and be part of it. And, when we find out about this new trial motion, I'm happy to come back and update you and kind of let you know what's happening. So, all right. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, again, it's your boy Norm, as far as being consistent and making sure we're bringing receipts. I'll see you guys in another video.
All true. All true.